A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Shri Radharatnath Ki. Shri Giri Govardhan Ki. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki. Shri Nitai Gaura Hari Ki. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga.
All glories to His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. Well, devotees, it really is very nice to be here with you. And the subject which we've been asked to talk about, unfortunately, it's a little bit awkward here, but anyway. The subject is the power of humility, which is very important and wonderful subject. So, and actually, those of you who were with us previously on a yearly basis, we were in the Drakensberg for a few days. Some of you were there. We actually did about a 3-day seminar on humility in the broad sense. So these are some points from that seminar. And yeah, a very important subject. So many things can be said about it. And well, let us start with a few prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesh Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vajikapaturibhyas Chakripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So yes, the power of humility, and actually I'll be looking at it also in a sort of a broader context to some degree. But such an important subject. We all know the famous verse, Shikshastakam verse 3, Trinada Pisa Nichena Tarora Pisa Hishnana Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. Every devotee, of course, has heard that many, many times, that one should chant the holy names of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects unto others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. And of course, the fact is that only in that state of mind can one chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. And of course, chanting the holy names of the Lord is the process for this Kali Yuga. Other things are there. Deity worship, of course, is there. We've got these beautiful photos of deities, and that's also important, but not as important, particularly in this age, as the chanting of the holy names. and other things also. Fire sacrifice, silent meditation, and different things. Different things are there in the process of Krishna consciousness. But first and foremost, particularly in the Kali Yuga, is the chanting of the holy names. So the thing is, as that verse spoken by Lord Chaitanya says, if you're in that very humble state of mind, then you can chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. But you can only chant the holy names of the Lord constantly if you are in that state of mind. Otherwise, you may chant. So many people chant. Many people chant. But if you're not in that state of mind, you will not be able to chant constantly. It'll become, well, the mind will just feel it needs to focus on something else from time to time, something like that. That's what will happen if we're not in that state of mind. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that verse is mentioned, is quoted a few times in the act, not in a purport, but just as one of the verses in the book. And the first time it's quoted, it's Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, the author, is talking about certain things which Lord Chaitanya did, and that was one of the things. Just really encourage strongly people to chant and to be in such a state of mind. So he emphasizes it very strongly, and the way he puts it is that we should wear this verse around our necks like a necklace or like our neck beads. We should, keep it there around our necks all the time. And that means just right there with us. Right there with us. Where we can be very conscious and aware of it. So the verse is there, and the point of the verse, of course, is to be able to chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. So the power, and that's also the power of humility. The power of humility is seen in different ways, but this is one of the very main ways that humility has such power that it allows a person to chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. And like we said, without that humility, it becomes impossible, actually. The mind will not allow us. As we sometimes say, the mind has a mind of its own. And sometimes, there's a verse actually in the Bhagavatam, I forget where it is, but it's there. And the verse says, the mind tends to be like a wild animal. A wild animal, if you don't keep it tied up, if you want to keep it under control, if you don't keep it tied up, then as soon as you untie it, it's gone. It's just gone, because it's a wild animal, and that's what they want. They want to be free. So the mind wants to be free. You know, in a certain sense, you might say, oh, that's nice, to be free. To be imprisoned or, severely restricted, something like that, or that's not so nice. People should be free. But not in this sense. Free to go wild. Right. So yes, it's really important. It's the most foundational, fundamental point in Krishna consciousness, that if you can get your chanting of the holy names together, really together, then you have basically got it in Krishna consciousness. You're basically there. Yes. At least, at the very least, you are well on your way to being there. Oh yeah. So the humility is there to facilitate and to help. And so therefore it's very powerful. Humility is very powerful. Without the humility, you can't really do it. Certainly, it'll be so much more difficult to do it without the humility, and actually you won't be able to do it. So humility is extremely powerful. And there are a number of examples and sort of pieces of information and so on in that regard, which we would like to give you today to encourage you in that direction. First thing is, first thing I could say, a little encouragement, something encouraging, is that, at least in a certain sense, it shouldn't be too difficult to be humble, because we have very good reason to be humble. It means we don't have a lot to be proud of. Really, we don't have a lot to be proud of. Even if we're intelligent, you're all intelligent, and many of you are academically qualified and have very responsible occupations and so on. So you could say, yes, I'm qualified, I'm intelligent, but where's the intelligence coming from? It's coming from Krishna. That's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 15, verse 15. Mata smriti jnanam apohanam cha savasya chaham riddhi sanivishto mata smriti jnanam apohanam cha. I'm situated in everyone's heart, and from me is coming knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Yeah. So, Mr. PhD, do we have any PhDs here? But anyway, Mr. or Mrs. academically qualified person, you know where your qualification came from. It came from Krishna's mercy. He gave you the intelligence. And if he didn't, you'd be stumped. You wouldn't make it. So in that sense, even if we're intelligent, or maybe we're physically strong, when you get to my age, your days of being physically strong are well and truly over. Srila Prabhupada, there's a funny little story. Srila Prabhupada, he was my age, actually he was a bit older, he was probably around 75 at the time of this particular incident. He was in Mayapur talking to some devotees, and he didn't have a shirt on, it was hot. He just had a top piece and dhoti on, so his arms were exposed. And Srila Prabhupada was talking about physical strength. And he said, and he went, like this. He said, yes, when I was young, I was strong, like this. And he went sort of like that, you know how it works. And he said, but now just see, false tire, a flat tire. Flat tire. Oh, Krishna. Yes. So, in a sense, it should be easy to become humble, to be humble, because we rarely, truly lack good qualification, like good reasons to be proud. We truly lack them. But of course, the mind is expert. You know what they say, the pauper is proud of his penny. The principle that if we've got something, a little bit of a good quality, it came from Krishna, but we've got it, then we can become very proud of it, even though it's coming from Krishna and not from us. Yeah. So, right, so here's an example. We're going to go through a number of examples. This is quite a famous example of the power, not just humility in the general sense, but the actual power, the Shakti, which is there within humility. And it's a very famous story, which I imagine you're all familiar with. So I won't go through the details, but it's the famous story it's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Leela, chapter 16, the story of Kali Das. And like I said, I'm assuming that you're quite familiar with that story, but just in very simple terms, he was extremely humble. And he took basically a vow to take the remnants of food of all the devotees in Bengal, and in those days and today also, there were many millions of devotees in Bengal, many millions. But he took a vow to get some of the food remnants because he worshipped them. He took the devotees so seriously, and he felt himself to be so lacking and disqualified in their presence. Humility. So he felt, for my own benefit, I need to get actually three things: the remnants of their prasadam, some dust from their feet, and some of the water which has washed their lotus feet. And so he did that. We may go to the office or the business every morning to do what we do. He would go out and find devotees to get the food remnants of every morning. And that's what he'd do all day. And he pretty much did. According to Chaitanya Charitamrita, he pretty much got the food remnants of all the devotees in Bengal. It was just his mission, his life's mission. So, like I said, it's a long story. We won't go through all the details, but basically the point is, he did it. Their food remnants, the dust from their feet, the water that's washed their feet. This is all such humility on his part. And Chaitanya Charitamrita says that taking the remnants of the food of Vaishnavas is so valuable that it induced Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to offer Kalidas his supreme mercy. Lord Chaitanya was extremely merciful. I mean, just really extremely, extremely merciful. To all sorts, even all sorts of rotten people and just terrible people who you wouldn't really think should or could get some mercy. They're like just rejects and hopeless cases. But he was very merciful to all sorts of people, including those very unlikely candidates, undeserving in the extreme. He gave them his mercy. But Kalidas, he gave his supreme mercy. There's a distinction there between the mercy he gave to everybody else, even Jagai and Madai, and the mercy he gave Kalidas. And it is mentioned how he gave some mercy, just an example of how he gave this extra special, like unique mercy, which he didn't give anyone else, but he gave it to Kalidas, is that Kalidas, one time, he came with all the devotees from Bengal for Rath Yatra and to meet with Lord Chaitanya, more or less in the middle of the year. They would come every year, some hundreds of devotees, and spend some months with Lord Chaitanya and attend the Rath Yatra with him. So Kalidas came one time also. And when he came, he was sort of, shadowing Lord Chaitanya, following him around. And there was one particular thing. Lord Chaitanya, before he would enter the Jagannath temple, which he would go in a few times every day, but each time before he would go, there's stairs leading up to the entrance, and at that time, at least at the bottom of the stairs, there was a little ditch, and water was there, so people could wash their feet before going up and then going into the temple. So Lord Chaitanya would do that every day, every time. And he actually had a bodyguard, Lord Chaitanya. He had an assistant who was Govinda Das, and he had a bodyguard whose name was Kashishvara. And bodyguard, he was a big, strong man. And he had strict orders. No one could touch Lord Chaitanya's feet. Or in this case, when Lord Chaitanya was going up to the temple, no one could get some of the water which was used for washing his feet. And Kashishvara was there watching, and if anyone came forward to get some of that water, he'd stop them physically. He'd physically stop them. So, the one time, which is described there, Lord Chaitanya's there. Govinda takes some water, pours it over Lord Chaitanya's feet, and Kalidas jumps in from the side. cups his hands underneath the feet of Lord Chaitanya, catches some of the water and drinks it. And, I mentioned there were strict orders like that. And there's an incident actually in that regard when Lord Chaitanya and the devotees were cleaning the Gundicha temple. Then Lord Chaitanya was cleaning the altar. And the altar there is just very simple. It's just like a, not square, but like rectangular box sort of thing. And the deities sit on top. And there's no, decorative pillars and top and all that sort of thing. It's just a raised platform. And Lord Chaitanya was up on the top of it, cleaning it. And his feet were sticking over the side. And so one devotee, Bengali devotee, he came, and his service was to pour water as those who are doing the washing, as they need here, we need some water here. He'd come and pour some water here and then there. So that was what he was doing, just pouring water. And there's Lord Chaitanya's feet hanging over the edge. And this devotee just casually came over like, yes, here we are, we're pouring water. And he poured water over Lord Chaitanya's feet. Deliberately, but like, just pouring water somewhere. Yeah, and one devotee then saw this and jumped in and got some water. And Lord Chaitanya noticed, and he got really angry. He got really angry, and he actually chastised Swarup Damodar Goswami, who was the leader of the Bengali Vaishnavas. And Lord Chaitanya said to him, just see what your Bengali Vaishnav did. Yeah, he did this. And it's right there in Chaitanya Charitamrita. I think it's the 12th chapter of Madhya Lila. So, but now in the case of Kalidas, Lord Chaitanya, he's standing there, he's watching. Kashishvara is there, his big bodyguard. And Kalidas climbs and gets a handful and drinks it, and then a second time and drinks it, and a third time and drinks it. And Lord Chaitanya didn't say anything, except the fourth time. He came, and fourth time Lord Chaitanya said, Kalidas, you've had enough. That's all he said. He didn't chastise him or anything of that sort. Yeah. So that's an example to illustrate how Lord Chaitanya offered Kalidas his supreme mercy, because nobody else got that mercy, actually, just Kalidas. And it was because of his faith in the devotees and the faith in the mercy of the devotees, like we said, but it's an aspect of humility. If you're not humble, if you're a sort of typically proud materialist, and someone comes along and says, oh, look, I got some food here. It's the leftovers of your managing director. Would you like some? He ate half of it, but then you wouldn't think, oh, how nice. No, you'd think more like, excuse me, something like that. Thanks, but no thanks. So, yeah, because of Kalidas's humility, he got that special mercy. That's the power. It's the power of humility. And so therefore, let me just read a couple of verses here in which the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he says, therefore, giving up hatred and hesitation, try to eat the remnants of the food of Vaishnavas, for you will thus be able to achieve your desired goal of life. The remnants of food offered to Lord Krishna are called Mahaprasadam. After the same Mahaprasadam has been taken by a devotee, the remnants are elevated to Mahaprasadam. The dust of the feet of a devotee, the water that has washed the feet of a devotee, and the remnants of food left by a devotee are three very powerful substances. By rendering service to these three, one attains the supreme goal of ecstatic love for Krishna. In all the revealed scriptures, this is loudly declared again and again. Therefore, my dear devotees, please hear from me, for I insist again and again. Please keep faith in these three and render service to them without hesitation. From these three, one achieves the highest goal of life, ecstatic love of Krishna. This is the greatest mercy of Lord Krishna. The evidence is Kalidas himself. Excuse me. Let's move that. Okay. Right, so that's an example. That's one thing. I'd like to do something else now. I got a few quotations from Srila Prabhupada and some other places. Listen to these. So, this is Prabhupada, a letter on December the 9th, 1968. So one who feels humble and meek has the door for the kingdom of God opened for him or her. Then another thing from Prabhupada from the Krishna book. If a person does not become meek and humble, all his studies of the Vedas and Puranas and his vast knowledge of the Shastras are simply outward dress, like the costume of a theatrical artist dancing on the stage. That's from the Krishna book, chapter 78. Here's an interesting one. This is from Manu Samhita. A Brahmin should ever shrink from honor as from poison, and should always be desirous of disrespect as if of ambrosia. Interesting. Or as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, what is it now? Well, at least to the effect that friends will chastise you, enemies will flatter you. Okay. This is now from Srila Jiva Goswami. By humility and meekness, one attracts the attention of Krishna. That is the verdict of all the Vedas. Therefore, if one becomes very humble and meek, he can easily attain the lotus feet of Krishna in this age of Kali. And I mean, I've got a whole lot of these quotations, but this is now one from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. May we be ever ready to sweep away from our hearts by the rough application of hundreds of pointed broomsticks the wicked design of desiring to be honored above other persons by the devotees of God. God will be merciful to us, and we shall be blessed by the gift of devotion to his divine feet. The very day that we are delivered from the evil desire of seeking advantages and honors from others. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And how about something from, let's see, what is it? Something from Srila Prabhupada, yeah. Here we go. Yeah. So, these are a few quotations from Srila Prabhupada. So, a devotee asks, how can one remain humble in executing his devotional service? Prabhupada, yes, if he thinks himself that I am non-entity, helpless, then he can remain humble. If he thinks, I can do something, I've got so much intelligence, then he cannot become humble. Just like a child is humble always, because he knows that I'm completely helpless. Unless mother helps me, I'm completely helpless. Therefore, whenever he's in need of something, he cries, Mother, help me. This is helplessness. Helplessness, always. Karpanye. This is one of the items of surrender. Unless you think yourself helpless, you cannot surrender. Surrender is complete when you think yourself that you are helpless. I'm helpless, but because I'm surrendered to Krishna, he'll save me. This faith also must be there, that although I'm helpless, I'm factually helpless, but because I'm surrendered to Krishna, I have no danger. He'll help me, protect me. Okay. Here's a good one. Listen to this. This is a bit of a deep one. Devotee, you must be higher than the Paramahansa stage, Prabhupada. Prabhupada, I'm lower than you. I'm lower than you. Devotee, you're so beautiful. You're Paramahansa, but still you're preaching to us. Prabhupada, no, I'm lower than you. I'm the lowest of all creatures. I'm simply trying to execute the order of my spiritual master, that's all. That should be the business of everyone. Try your best to execute the higher order. That is the safest way of progressing. One may be in the lowest stage, but if he tries to execute the duty entrusted upon him, he is perfect. He may be in lowest stage, but because he's trying to execute the duty entrusted to him, then he's perfect. That is the consideration. Okay, let's see. From my personal point of view, I think that I am so sinful that I cannot even approach Krishna to show me any favor. But I have only one hope, my spiritual master. He's very kind. So some way or other, he's dragging me towards Krishna. That is the only hope. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita says, therefore, Guru Krishna, by the mercy of the spiritual master and by the mercy of Krishna, one gets into Krishna consciousness. Narada Muni is our original spiritual master, and he has dragged so many fallen souls towards Krishna. And we're also hoping to be dragged by him through the disciplic succession. Otherwise, if we study our own qualifications, there are none. Rather, I've got so many disqualifications. Here's a couple of examples of the power of humility, or humility and the power. First one is the power of humility. Some of you will have heard this story. It's one I've told on some occasions. So Srila Prabhupada was in Los Angeles, and there they have, to this day, big temple. It's a whole big complex with big temple room. And every morning Srila Prabhupada would give class. And, well, sort of very similar to this, but on a bigger scale. There are 3 altars, and Prabhupada would be sitting on this side, like facing straight across, not like me, on an angle, but facing straight across, with the deities immediately to his left. And then, so he'd give the class, and then get up, and everyone would get up, and Prabhupada would get off the Vyasasan, and then walk out through the front door, back where Prabhupada's sitting, more or less. So, and he would sort of curve around. He wouldn't just step off, turn, and go straight. He would just sort of curve around and then make his way out. And it was like, he followed almost like a path every day. So this one devotee, he was there. And he wanted to have an interaction with Srila Prabhupada. So one day he decided to position himself right on the path, on the path that Prabhupada took every morning. So there he was. He's waiting now. He's got his spot. He's ready. Because what he wanted to do was, Prabhupada comes by, and all he wanted to do was just go, in a sort of quite a noticeable way, say, Jai Prabhupada. And he was assuming or hoping Prabhupada would go, Jai. Some sort of exchange would be there, just momentarily like that. So he's there, and he's waiting. And sure enough, here comes Srila Prabhupada turning around, and he's coming right. So the devotee's in the right position. He is there. And Prabhupada now is like 2 meters, 1.5 meters, 1 meter, and devotees just, and suddenly Prabhupada turned to his left. I mean, if we take it like this, and he went out. There was a door on the side of the temple room on the left side into the kitchen. And Prabhupada just turned like that and went into the kitchen. And there's the devotee just, he missed out today. But then he saw in the kitchen was Jayananda, who was a very famous devotee, and to this day he's just one of the great sort of heroic devotees, you could say, remembered to this day. On his disappearance day, I think, then Prabhupada wanted us to cook a feast. Have like a celebration. So he was in the kitchen, Jayananda was in the kitchen, cooking the breakfast for all the devotees, and there was a good few hundred devotees there, because Prabhupada was there, and so devotees would come from all over the country, practically all over not so distant areas, so a few hundred devotees, Jayananda's cooking for them. Prabhupada went in there and started talking to Jayananda, not just Jai, but he started conversing with Jayananda. And the devotee understood that you can't just manipulate situations to get Prabhupada's mercy. But if you, like Jayananda, if you're really humble and you've really got a service attitude, then Prabhupada will give you his mercy and you won't have to go looking for it. Of course, you can also go looking for it, that's okay. But Prabhupada, with his mercy, will come to you. And Jayananda was very much like that. He was very much like that. And, you know, there's a whole biography, actually, with so many examples. Just one other one I could mention is that he died, he left his body in 1977, just before Prabhupada left. And Jayananda was only maybe 40-ish, something like that. But he got leukemia, blood cancer. And, before they knew it was too late, and then eventually passed away. So finally he was in some sort of hospital type of situation, just waiting to pass away. And he had his own room. One devotee came to visit him. And the devotee walked in, and so there's now an empty room, or there's just a room with a bed, couple of chairs, and no Jayananda. And he thought, well, they must have taken him for some test or some treatment or something. So the devotee sat down to wait. Then he noticed that Jayananda was lying on the floor on the other side of the bed. He hadn't noticed when he first walked in. So he got up and went to Jayananda and, what happened? Can I help you? Did you fall or something? And Jayananda said, no. On the bed was the pillow, and there was a picture of Srila Prabhupada leaning, just a small, type of picture, like these ones on the lower step of the altar, picture of Prabhupada leaning against the pillow on the bed. And so this devotee is saying, can I help you to get back on the bed? And Jayananda said, no. He said, in all the years I've been a devotee, I never had a decent bed. Because, in the good old days, I can tell you what, we used to sleep on the floor. And I mean, actually, on the floor, with nothing. I mean, usually using a sleeping bag, which doesn't give you a lot of protection. So he said, all the years I've been a devotee, I never had a nice bed. And finally here in the hospital, I got a really nice bed. But then I thought, no, I must offer it to my spiritual master. So therefore, Prabhupada's there. I'm just lying here, I'm okay. So, just see. And he got so much mercy from Srila Prabhupada. And an interesting point that Srila Prabhupada makes in Srimad Bhagavatam, or in the Krishna book actually. It's at some point during those 6 chapters describing the rasa dance, 30, 31, around in the 30s. 6 chapters there describe the rasa dance and how Krishna at a certain point left the gopis and went away and just left them, sort of abandoned them in the middle of dancing, and just went away with Radharani. And then, of course, they went to try and find them, but then they found Radharani, and Krishna had left her also. And the way it's presented is that the gopis had felt some type of pride because Krishna was with each gopi individually, all of them, dancing with each one. And each one saw Krishna only dancing with her and didn't see that there's Krishna dancing with the next one sort of right next to me. So they, as far as they could see all around, there's these many gopis, but she's the only one who Krishna is dancing with. He's not dancing with the others. That was sort of the impression, at least. So they got proud, thinking, Krishna's dancing with me, just see. And then Krishna left them to teach them not to be proud. However, we, dear devotees, should be very careful not to think that, oh yeah, they got proud. I get proud every now and then. The gopis get proud. We all get proud. And Radharani gets proud. And we got to watch out for pride. Because it's all leela, it's all pastime, it's not. In other words, we shouldn't think that the gopis just got proud, because they didn't. But on a certain level, it may appear like that, so in those terms we can learn that lesson. So there, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Krishna can tolerate any fault in his devotee. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, verse 30, famous verse, Apichet Suduracharo Bhajate Mamananyabhak Sadur Eva Samantavya Samyagvya Vasato Hisa. That even if a devotee commits the most abominable action, the devotee should still be considered saintly because he's properly situated in his sort of like basic determination, even though he got off track there, kind of on the surface, but in the depths of his heart, he's a devotee. It was just superficial, accidental, something went wrong. So such a devotee, Lord Krishna says, should be considered saintly. I mean, as long as they are situated in their basic determination to be a devotee. If they get up to some nonsense because they don't want to really be devotees, but they actually want to just do some nonsense in general in their lives, that's a different thing. But if it's some sort of accident or some extraordinary happening out of the blue, that sort of thing, then we can take it that the devotee is saintly and should be considered saintly. Or in other words, Krishna tolerates faults in devotees. It's one thing to do some nonsense or, something which is not really up to the standard. It's another thing to think about it. If we were judged in terms of our following regulative principles, if we were judged not on what we physically do or don't do, if we were not judged on those things, but we were judged on what we think about sometimes. I have some doubts about whether any of us would be initiated or anything. Yeah. So anyway, so the point there is, Krishna is very tolerant, and he doesn't reject the devotee. Even if the devotee does something which is actually quite bad, but they've got the basic at heart determination to be devotees and, to rectify themselves like that. And Krishna tolerates. Yeah, he's a conditioned soul. Look at his past. How many lifetimes of doing all sorts of wrong things. So, if somehow something happens momentarily, Krishna tolerates, and he advises all the other devotees to tolerate also. But Prabhupada says, Krishna can tolerate any fault in his devotee, but he doesn't tolerate pride. Yeah. Which is again connected with Trinada Pisanichena, being prideless. Being prideless, being humble, so important, beyond other qualifications or qualities. The quality of humility is so important. So the detrimental feature of pride, being the opposite, is particularly not appreciated. Yeah. So that's something to bear in mind too. There's a nice story in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri, with his personal assistant, Govinda Das, who was actually his godbrother, not his disciple, but his godbrother. So in that sense, you could say equal, basically, more or less. So Govinda, though, was acting as the personal assistant and would serve him lunch every day. And after lunch, Lord Chaitanya would lie down and Govinda would massage his back, and Lord Chaitanya would sort of eventually just doze off. And every day he would doze off after a little while of being massaged. And Govinda would then stop the massage and go and take lunch. Remnants of Lord Chaitanya, he would then take lunch. So, but this one day, Lord Chaitanya had lunch, and he didn't just lie down as he normally would, and then Govinda Das would massage him. He lay down, but he lay leaning against the front wall of his little house. I mean, it was sort of like a hut, really. But on his side, lying on his side, but with his back leaning against the wall, and he was leaning across the door. So Govinda, now he's got to massage Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya's already sort of dozing, or so getting close to dozing off. So Govinda stepped over him into the doorway, turned around and then massaged his back while sort of kneeling in the doorway itself. Yeah. So then Lord Chaitanya actually fell asleep. So now it's time for Govinda to stop the massage. And normally he would just step away and take lunch. But now he's behind Lord Chaitanya, who is blocking the door. There's no other way to get out. So what to do? What would you suggest? Step back over Lord Chaitanya? No. No, because anything sacred in Krishna consciousness we shouldn't step over. We mustn't step over like beads, like japa beads, like flowers that have been offered to the Lord, like prasadam. And similarly, we mustn't step over the bodies of devotees, because the bodies of devotees are sacred. They're sacred. So now there's Govinda. He stepped over Lord Chaitanya to get at his back, to do the service. But now the service is finished, and what's next for him is to go and eat. So he's just sort of looking after himself. But now he felt, I can't do it. So he stayed there until Lord Chaitanya woke up. And Lord Chaitanya woke up and looked over and said, oh, what are you doing here? Why didn't you go and take lunch? And Govinda said, well, you were lying there. And Lord Chaitanya said, well, how did you get inside the door? And why didn't you go out the same way? And Chaitanya Charitamrita is very interesting, These literatures are full of subtleties. The author says, Govinda did not reply, but he just looked down and he thought that for service to you, I'll do anything. But for service to myself, I can't do so many things that I might do for service to you. But he didn't say it. He didn't say it. He just knelt there until Lord Chaitanya said, oh, all right, then go take your lunch. But, it's one of my favorite little stories. Like I said, we have a 3-day seminar, and, we've only got, what would you say, 3-4 hours. So, so we can't go through everything. But I thought I could, I could read, let's conclude, shall we, with something from Chaitanya Charitamrita Anchalila, chapter 7. This is Lord Chaitanya's humility. Lord Chaitanya, at this point in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya is having a whole exchange over some days with a very prominent devotee, famous devotee scholar named Vallabhabhata. In which Vallabhabhata is trying to impress Lord Chaitanya with his literary skills and knowledge of Krishna consciousness. And at one point, Lord Chaitanya gets really tired of this fellow trying to show off. And it does different things to teach him lessons, but here, Lord Chaitanya expresses his own humility encouraging Vallabhabhata to do the same thing. So he says, Lord Chaitanya says, "My dear Vallabhabhata, you're a learned scholar. Kindly listen to me. I'm a sannyasi of the Mayavad school." Lord Chaitanya. Mayavad, for those who don't know, they're like, well, they're pretty out of it, to tell you the truth. They're really confused people, and they're not taken seriously by the devotees. But as a formality, Lord Chaitanya took sannyas from a Mayavadi. So, but he was a devotee, of course, he's Lord Chaitanya. So I'm a sannyasi of the Mayavad school. Therefore, I have no chance of knowing what Krishna Bhakti is. Nevertheless, my mind has become purified because I've associated with Advaita Acharya, who's directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's unparalleled in his understanding of all the revealed scriptures and the devotional service of Lord Krishna. Therefore, he's called Advaita Acharya. He's such a great personality that by his mercy he can convert even the meat-eaters to the devotional service of Krishna. Who therefore can estimate the power of his Vaishnavism? Lord Chaitanya is pointing these people out because they're all there in the room. There's Advaita Acharya. Now there's Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda Prabhu, the Avaduta, is also directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's always intoxicated with the madness of ecstatic love. Indeed, he's an ocean of love of Krishna. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya perfectly knows the 6 philosophical theses. He's therefore the spiritual master of the entire world in teaching the 6 paths of philosophy. He is the best of devotees. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya has shown me the limit of devotional service. Only by his mercy have I understood that devotional service to Krishna is the essence of all mystic yoga. Srila Ramananda Roy is the ultimate knower, because he's pointing them out. Now it's Ramananda Roy is the ultimate knower of the transcendental mellows of Lord Krishna's devotional service. He has instructed me that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Through the mercy of Ramananda Roy, I have understood that ecstatic love of Krishna is the highest goal of life, and that spontaneous love of Krishna is the highest perfection. So this is Lord Chaitanya, who is the Lord of all of them, but in his humility, trying to inspire Vallabhabhata to be humble. I mean, and he actually feels like that. It's not like he's putting on an act, but he actually feels that by the mercy of Ramananda Roy, I've understood these things. Yes. So humility, if we look around in our literatures and in our tradition here and there, then we'll see how important humility is and how we must cultivate it ourselves. And like we said earlier on, our good fortune is that we have a lot to be humble about. If we just look at ourselves carefully enough, we'll say, look at all the things that are wrong with me. And anything which is right with me, it's just by mercy. But otherwise, in terms of what I am and how I've been brought up and so on. I'm not really to be taken very seriously. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comments or questions? Because you know what they told me? They told me the devotees at Midrand are very intelligent and thoughtful. They think about these things, so therefore they have many questions. That's what they told me. Yes.
It's just a little experience I had on Thursday. I didn't know the topic was humility, but so we're out in Boomspruit doing medical services door to door, house to house. So Suniti had a patient at this house, and so we went in, and the husband, older gentleman, 80 years old. So when he saw us, so when we do our work, we wear our tilak. So he noticed the tilak and he put his palms together. And anyway, Suniti went inside and was treating the wife, and I sat with him and I spoke with him. Very nice, welcoming gentleman. So we were talking different things, and then I asked him, what did you do before you retired? He's retired now. Then he said, I was a handyman. A handyman.
Handyman, okay.
And then he was quiet for like 20 seconds, and he said, actually, it's not true. But in my tradition, he's a Christian, but it's not recommended that we speak our qualifications. We should keep ourselves very low and humble. We shouldn't boast about what we're good at and what like that. Then he honestly said what he did. Very big, qualified mechanical engineer, did big projects in South Africa. But he said, yeah, in our tradition, that's the mood that we encourage to have, because the Lord, he favors those who are humble. And so, if the Lord favors me, then that's my good fortune. So that was his mood.
Yeah, sure, that's good. That's what it says in the Bible.
And then he asked me, so what's the marking? So I told him, I'm a Hare Krishna. I was a monk in a monastery for 20 years. And he said, oh, I know Hare Krishnas. I have the books.
Oh, really?
Yes. He was actually Hungarian.
Oh.
Yeah, but he married a South African lady, and he's lived in South Africa for a long time.
I see.
And then, so when we were leaving, we said, we'll bring him more books. And he said, yes, please bring me more books. I'm very open to reading and knowing more.
Okay.
So it's nice.
That's good. Thank you. That's nice. That's interesting. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, what's the next step in our program?
Have a little kirtan.